Hey guys, how's it going? Excited to do another video today. Today's a big day I've been waiting for a while. We have an auction coming tonight on the Facebook group, the Sorcery Contested Realm fan page and marketplace Facebook group, and on the Collector Art House Discord. And we're going to feature the artwork of Mattias Frisk. So that is the painting that's coming forward. It's called Minor Explosion. I'm going to go to Mattias's cards here and kind of give you some background on his work for the alpha release, what we expect to see. All right, so Minor Explosion, that's the one I had mentioned here. I'll show you a picture of the original painting in a moment, but I just kind of wanted to show some of the cards that we can expect to see in the alpha release. And actually, I have the Exorcism painting as well, which will be coming probably next weekend. So I'm going to get some photos out there and feature that throughout the week. But you see Mattias's work here. He's a very unique artist. I did an interview with him. I think it was one of the earlier interviews that I had done, and actually one of the most viewed. So he's very popular. He's an artist out in Sweden. Super creative guy. He does everything from original paintings, obviously. He does logo design, T-shirt design. He's the frontman and singer of a, I don't know if you consider a metal band or hardcore style band. So I think he plays guitar and sings as the front man of that band called Van Held, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So you go Google that out on the website or out on YouTube. You'll find some of his videos from his live performances and things. But this kind of genre of art kind of plays into that perfectly. And I think that's probably how Eric discovered him. I'll have to ask Eric that at some time. How he discovered him, if it's through his music or just through his artwork out there on his different social media platforms. But he has a beautiful, very wide variety of artwork in a couple different Facebook groups where you can go find his artwork. I think maybe on Instagram as well. I forget if he uses that as much. But he has a couple websites that features a lot of his artwork, and I'm going to show that in a minute here in the interview. But these are the pieces we expect to see in the alpha set. So there's several different works here. He's got with the one site in the landscape type painting mode. I know he mentioned this was one of his favorite artworks. And really, he considers Exorcism to be one of his masterpieces, and it's super impressive. When you see this in person, it's really unbelievable, and the same is true for Minor Explosion, and there's some history there that I'll get to in a moment. A couple of his works, I know the Scourge Zombies and Wrath of the Sea, I believe, were both purchased by the game creator, so those are kind of the off of the market, and I believe Mattias will be offering these the rest of his paintings in time, right? So he's starting with Minor Explosion and Exorcism. So if I go to the Behind the Art page on my website, collectorarthouse.com, I had done fairly early on this Minor Explosion artwork really popped out to me. And the reason is, if you go back to Alpha Magic the Gathering, there is this famous piece, of course, called Disintegrate by Anson Maddox. And Anson also has actually done work for Sorcery. He only has one card, and I can show you that here quickly. If I go to Anson, he just has the one painting, and I believe Eric had said that's just a function of his availability. Some of these artists Eric would have loved to do more commissions with, but they had a backlog of projects and really didn't have the bandwidth to do more, right? So we just have the one piece in alpha, unless there's more surprises that I'm unaware of. But this is the only card I've seen from Anson for the game. Font of Life, really nice card. All right, but if I go back and go back to this Behind the Art feature that I wrote about Minor Explosion, when I did the interview with Mattias, or maybe in subsequent conversation, I've talked to him quite a bit before the interview and since then, we had talked about this piece Disintegrate, and this I think was the first he had seen this. So coincidentally, some might say it is similar, it's not. I mean, I think it's fair to say it's got a similar type vibe with this kind of exploding corpse in a way. But I went and researched the background to learn more about this piece by Anson. And interestingly, I don't want to go off on too far of a tangent down the magic realm, but this work was done in 30 minutes time by Anson Maddox as he was doing a large number of pieces for the Magic the Gathering alpha set back in 1992, 1993 this probably was. This one's dated 1993, but he was one of the premier artists, or one of the one of the artists that did a large amount of work for Magic Alpha. In fact, it was 10% of the 295 card set. So that was also a very large set, like you see in Sorcery. Sorcery is probably going to be, I think the company said 403, 404, somewhere thereabouts in terms of total set size. So Anson did 30 of those cards, and one was this Disintegrate piece. So I asked Mattias about that and asked him if he drew inspiration from that or if he even knew it existed. Mattias is not a TCG guy typically, so he didn't really know about the history of Magic and about this piece at all. So it's just purely coincidental, or maybe it came through the art direction. But coincidentally, that's how you get it. And then in this article, Mattias explained kind of his approach to how he did this painting. So he said, like he often does in a lot of his paintings, he starts with the grayscale underpainting, and then he started sketching up the composition in acrylics, and then he started splattering paint over it to get this kind of splash effect. To show like the light shining through the corpse, and you see some of the skeletal remains kind of exploding off in the distance there. So he said he continued working out the details and small adjustments. Then he used oil paint and transparent glazes, coloring the underpainting and fading in some shades. On top of that, he worked in opaque oil paint, making the fire and other details, and added some final splatter. So it's super interesting to hear that kind of like process-oriented approach, because this seems so intentional, I guess is the word I would use, in how the final product came out. But, through the splattering of paint and then refinements during that process, he ended up with this amazing masterpiece. And I really think this is going to be one of the more iconic paintings that we're going to see from the Alpha set in time. For one, because it harkens back to vintage Magic, and the game Sorcery draws some inspiration from vintage Magic, but even just on its own, just looking at it makes it look super cool. And then the last thing I wanted to point out here is this was like a working kind of sketch type version he had of this until he matured the design into this final product. And then this one's just a blow up of that. And then if I go to my Facebook group here, if you go to the Sorcery Contested Realm fan page and marketplace, that is where the auction will be held, and it'll be mirrored in the Collector Art House Discord. So scrolling down here, I have a post that featured the original. Okay, so here is the painting image of the original artwork by Mattias Frisk. I actually took this picture and then just edited out the background to prominently feature the painting itself. So this is the original in all its glory. It's fairly large. I want to say 16.5 by 13.5, going off of recollection. I think I actually had a note about it here. Yeah, exactly. 16.5 by 23.5 inches. So it's pretty large and sizable. It's on a panel board type of material. So it's like, a few, not maybe like a centimeter or so, like thickness wise. It feels just kind of like substantial, like painted on wood, just durable and tough, like the painting would imply. So that's really cool and fitting for the work. So I'm going to close that out. The other thing I wanted to show briefly before I go to the live cam and show something else that Mattias had sent me with these paintings is the interview that I had done with him. So if you're at collectorarthouse.com and you go to interviews and articles, scroll down. As I say, it was one of the earlier interviews that I had done. Here it is. And I just kind of wanted to showcase and feature some of his work and just the sheer breadth and vastness of his portfolio. Really impressive. So I started off talking about kind of his background. As I mentioned, he's from Sweden. This is the little area in Sweden where he resides from. And interestingly, in some of his work, in particular Wrath of the Sea, he has an element from his hometown that he incorporated into the image. So here he's talking about some of his inspirations. Really cool story. Dan Seagrave is one of his big idols. And you can kind of see that inspiration come across in his work and in his style. But there's a great picture here. If I continue to scroll down, here he is singing in the front man of his band. So yeah, he plays guitar, he sings, he looks like an intense guy, but he's like the nicest guy in the world when you talk to him. Really cool and super just polite and generous and easy to talk to. Really enjoyed doing this interview with him. So here he's featuring some of his t-shirt designs that he had done, some of the album covers. This kind of reminds you of a Seagrave, right, with all the line detail and complexity of it. Just the color tones and the finish on his work are really exceptional. Some more details about artists that influence him, illustrators that influence him. He lists Dan Seagrave right off the bat, right? And then I have these hyperlinks so you can go learn more about all these different artists at your leisure. And then there's this great picture of Mattias on the right and Dan Seagrave on the left. So he met him in person. The Entombed album cover, that's a Dan Seagrave masterpiece, like one of the really more iconic pieces by Dan Seagrave in his portfolio and probably what he's most famous for. There's a great story that I shared with my Patreon supporters through the exclusive channels on my Discord, where I talk about a sketch that Mattias had done as kind of a homage to this Entombed is the band name, the Clandestine album that Dan Seagrave had illustrated, right? So he did a sketch, or like a drawing. It's not a sketch, it's a drawing. It's a very detailed drawing, right? That was inspired by this album cover. And then he digitally painted it, had it printed, and then he gave it to Dan Seagrave when he met him here. So really fun, cool story of him meeting his hero. And now he's in Sorcery working with Dan. Really awesome, inspiring story about how he developed his artistic craft and now is working with one of his idols. All right, so here's some of the amazing Dan Seagrave artworks from Alpha. Really cool. Here's some of the process pieces and final of Scourge Zombies from Mattias. Look how incredible that painting is. You know, I envy Eric for owning this one. This is just really unbelievable. I'd die to see this in person. All right, so Wrath of the Sea, as I mentioned, this kind of tower that you see emerging prominently in Wrath of the Sea is from a building in his hometown, which I think here you go. Yep, here's an image of the building. There's the original painting. So really cool story there. Here's a bit more about the inner workings or the process behind how he developed Minor Explosion. And again, a large image of the original painting. Really impressive piece. Looks absolutely stunning in person. The plumes here on this piece, Flash Fires, is what it was called early on. I forget if they changed the name of that, but that's a really beautiful piece too. You see from the rough early concept piece that he matured into a super refined finished product with the subtle shadows and just the plumes of smoke coming off. He talks about how it was inspired by this piece here. So you go read more about that. But I regress. Let me go now to the live cam. So I'm going to pull that in. All right, and I want to show you, get rid of the keyboard. Wanted to show and feature this little booklet that Mattias had sent me. So it says Mattias Frisk on the front, and then in this book, it has a nice catalog or featuring of a lot of his work. And some of the history about Mattias's background. It says he works as an artist, illustrator, and musician. He has one master's degree in history of art and visual communications and another in culture and media production. So yeah, he's a master artist, really. He can do traditional, he can do digital, as I mentioned. He did the digital color rendering of the drawing tribute and homage to Clandestine, or the Dan Seagrave piece for Clandestine. And then when you go into the book, he has so many album covers that he's done throughout the years. You know, I see the oldest one, at least on this page, shows it dating back to 2010. And let me just read a little expert about his background. It says Mattias Frisk works mainly in oil on panel. So just like Minor Explosion, it was a combination of acrylics on panel and the splash paint that he described and the grayscale undertone. So Mattias works mainly on oil on panel, drawing or digital painting. In addition, he also creates images all digitally as well as collages. He uses quite the same approach in these techniques, starting with a grayscale version of the image that is colored digitally or by glazing. All right, so yeah, sometimes in his works for album covers and things, he'll start traditionally, as stated here, and then does some refinement digitally. But of course, in Sorcery Contested Realm, all of the work is entirely traditional. So it just shows the great skill that he has through the pieces I featured on the website there, and that you see in the image I took for the Minor Explosion painting. And here you have kind of a snapshot in one place of many of his album cover works. And you could just see the great creativity, the color character, the detail in his works. All album covers for different bands. Here in the lower right, you see a couple from his own band, Van Held. So this one from a 24 album, Relics of Self or Salvation, and Temple of Phobos, 2016. Pulverized Records. Cool studio name. All right, and then he gets into more of other designs he has done. So he does several T-shirt designs. You know, I think he sells these at shows and things. You could probably order them off of his website as well. Just Google Mattias Frisk, and you'll find that. You could find his Facebook pages where he talks about or he features a lot of his art. When I prepped for his interview, I went back and researched his background and looked through his portfolio, and I was blown away by how much work he's accomplished. He's not like an old guy, you know. He's fairly youngish looking. I don't know his exact age, but you know, middle age, let's say, roughly, maybe a little younger than that. And he just has like an incredibly impressive portfolio, dating back at least 10 to 15 years, it looks like here. And then is this the last page? Yeah. So finally on the last page, these are additional T-shirt designs he's done for different sources, and it talks about how he did it, you know, drawing/digital painting. So I guess this is a technique that he often likes to employ, where he'll do a very detailed drawing and then he will fill it in with a digital, you know, digitally color it. So you can control the color quality and make it look really polished and refined for a T-shirt print, or you know, sometimes in an album cover. So that's it, guys. Just want to kind of give you some history and context to Mattias Frisk as an artist and what he's all about, and his multi-talented abilities. If you like this kind of content, please let me know in the comments. I was thinking about doing more features on artists individually, featuring some of their sample cards when I have them. Unfortunately, I don't have any sample cards from Mattias currently to show off, but after the game comes out and I get some more of the alpha cards and pre-con decks and those types of things, I'll be happy to show those off and talk to you a little bit more about his art composition and some of the stories behind those pieces. But thank you all for following along. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and really appreciate it if you share with your network. All right, take care, everybody.